And then his answer is no. Domination's the only true bliss in this world. Isn't that right? Because I won. I won. You lost. My answer to this proposition is the correct one. Isn't that right, Joy Boy? That's how I viewed this moment. This is Emu basically saying, no, I won, therefore my answer is correct.
I believe that Emu and Joy Boy could have been cool friends, whatever, at first, but eventually their inherited wills of freedom grew to clash with each other to battle. Whereas in, like Sebastian kind of saying, isn't that right? He believed the best way for people to live, right, is for me controlling them and dominating them.
Admiration and respect that turned into envy and wanting what they had. But I also thought of who also did the same thing. Satan, who was close, was God's son, but envied and wanted God's power and position, but knew he couldn't get it. So he maneuvered things in a way to so that he could somehow get it. And I thought even the wording itself, he says, God and the devil. What is the difference?
That moment, they shared everything. Laughing together could have been the same idea, just interpreted in completely different ways. And that would explain why Emu reacts so emotionally when he says Joy Boy's name. That's not just anger. That's history. That's someone who knew him, stood beside him, and ultimately diverged from him in a fundamental way. So this is where it gets kind of deep. Since the chapter is titled God and Devil, it made me think of a relevant biblical parallel, specifically Gospel of Matthew 4:1-11, where Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness.
I really did find it interesting what Emu was saying and conveying to Loki about this like evil, demonic, holy trinity of powers, like corruption, covenants, the power of the omen. It basically creating this trinity and like how they fold into one another and beget the other. Corruption, like it's you lust for power, you're easily corrupted, right? You'll be corrupted so you can gain power, you know, and then you choose servitude for that power. You'll become a slave for the power, making the covenants. And then the envy to seek to achieve your goals and things becomes the power of your covenant, and that creates this holy trinity. It was really, really interesting. It's like he calls it domination. And as we see, everything Emu's about is dominating the world. He wants world domination. He's basically had it, but not to the degree that even he believes. He says he's still trying to create Mu's perfect world. So what does that exactly look like? Is everybody just Dami Reversied? It made me think back to that theory that I think, is it O'Hara? I think dropped about him trying to create the Dami Reversity around the world with the bridges. I was really interested in that. And like Emu just looks so powerful. Like he's so casually dealing with Loki when he's focused. And him appearing behind him and saying like, God, the devil, what's the difference? He's so lost in his own like grandeur. Like it doesn't matter. I am he. Like it doesn't matter to him whether it's God or the devil, et cetera, et cetera. But to him, he's like, there is no difference, right? And it made me think back a couple of things because Loki then goes, I don't give a crap. Nobody lords it over me. And then domination is the true bliss of this world is his response to that, saying, isn't that right? Thinking of Joy Boy getting distracted and then reacting in the way that he did, thinking back to Joy Boy. And it made me think back to Doflamingo's speech at Marine Ford, where he says, whoever wins this war becomes justice. So basically, I don't know if he had this conversation with Joy Boy or he just knows these are their two ideologies in contrast. But he thinks back to him. He goes, domination is the only true bliss in this world. Joy Boy represents freedom, seemingly. He represents everything Luffy stands for about breaking these chains and being happy and all the things that Luffy represents. And then his answer is no. Domination is the only true bliss in this world. Isn't that right? Because I won. I won. You lost. My answer to this proposition is the correct one. Isn't that right, Joy Boy? That's how I viewed this moment. This is Emu basically saying, no, I won, therefore my answer is correct. Joy Boy was wrong. And this is why he, for the first time ever, reacts this way, where he has the traditional One Piece face, where your mouth gets elongated and you're not calm and you're goofy, you're quirky. Like, he's enraged at the thought of Joy Boy. And it's because he's like, yo, I won. I shouldn't still have to do this. I won that war. And I'm still dealing with the remnants and the history of this one person. I still have to think about it, and it triggers this from him. I could be headcanoning with a little bit of that.
I like that perspective.
But that's...
I thought about it differently.
Okay, but that's how...
I'll tell you the truth. I don't know who's saying isn't that right.
That's fair.
Because they're both laughing.
That's fair. But even if that's the case, in this moment, he still says it.
Right.
I did love getting that little glimpse of Joy Boy looking very Luffy-like in the silhouette. I thought that was pretty cool. I'm assuming that hooded figure is Emu. It could very well be Lily. It could be anybody at this point.
I'm assuming it is Emu, too.
I'm assuming it's Emu. But that tells me that there might... Like, they were friends.
Yeah.
He's Joy Boy laughing. And maybe that's just them fighting, because Joy Boy could be a Like if he has the Nika fruit, like he could just be laughing.
Like he's always in year 5? That's annoying.
If he's fighting him, the odds are he was in that mode, right? So it's very possible that he wasn't, but it doesn't seem like there's real hostility going on here.
You're right. He like Itachi. Itachi was always wearing a Sharingan. All of a sudden, he died from this illness. Reason why he lost. Joy Boy 2, bro.
Maybe.
Emu says domination. I couldn't help but read it as first domination. Like domination, domination, and I was like,
you're low key inappropriate because you're thinking of Dami Mommy. I know it, bro. I know it, bro. I know it. We all think about Dami Mommies. Okay,
but anyway, but that gives me the possible hint to what Dami Reversi is, kinda. And so, hear me out. It's a small thing I just kind of thought of. Emo is possibly making the person's inner vices, like lust, self-interest, and envy, and making them dominate the person, or influencing them by corrupting them and making them covenants with them to do his will. So that's what I thought of. Like, this is what he's doing. Dami Reversi, domination. So that's why I thought of what Emo was doing, but him apart, how he's taking control of other people. So I thought that was very, very interesting.
You're going to want to hear what I got to say then.
All right, cool.
We're on the same boat.
All right. That's the mini part I had there. I'm going to let you take care of the rest for that part. So I also noticed Emo kind of looks like to be in the form we normally see him in the flashback, and not the form we see him now fighting. So I thought that was very interesting. Like, the one we normally see him in with the little cloak or the little head thing or hoodie, whatever thing he's wearing, and with the flashback with Joel, but he looks to be in that form and not the form we see him now. So I thought that was very interesting. I was like, hold on. I kind of thought of, like, he adopted that form later on, but what if that's just like his walking around form? Or it could be that's his walking around form, and his awakened form, like someone alluded to, is this form now, just like how Luffy's awakened form is the Nika. That it could be that as well. And it's a little bit what Sebastian was saying here too. Emo and Joe Boy seemed to be cool at first. Because it seemed to have this conversation, right? And also some people thought about it in the past, like, what was their relationship? Was it always beef, or was it like whatever, right? I actually kind of thought of, at first when I first saw them talking, I actually kind of thought of the Avatar: The Last Airbender. When everybody was living in harmony, everybody was cool, then the Fire Nation attacked. Like, everybody was chilling, and Emo was just like, go get him. Like, he started attacking everybody, right?
Like, from Belly, he in the bed. I don't like that.
And it may not be true about the whole Emo and Joe Boy's relationship. We don't know yet. But it makes me so much want to see more the Void Century and that time in the war.
Facts.
Like, so much more. Because, like, we're getting a little piece of here. And it's now that they're talking here.
Not yet, though.
I don't think we're going to get it yet.
I want to see it, but not yet.
And I thought it was very funny. In that statement, I feel like it could have been even the title of this chapter. Isn't that right? We got it 3 times.
Yeah.
We got Harold saying it. We got Joy Boy or Emo saying it in the flashback. And we got Emo saying it now. So isn't that right? I feel like that could have been the title. First, it seemed to have a certain meaning behind it. Isn't that right? But the real thing I want to add here, and I may be a little late on this take, but this section here made me think of what possibly could have even started the conflict between them or others. And I think it was due to their different and inherited wills and freedom. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to use these people as an example. Look at emus, doflamingos, anels, crocodiles, and even arlongs. Their inherited will and freedom was to dominate others or even control others' freedom. Whereas Rock's, Blackbird, and possibly even Davy's inherited will and freedom is to gain, seize power, or in rulership in their freedom. Their freedom was to rule, while Doflamingo there was to control and dominate others. Whereas in Joy Boy, Rogers, Shanks, Luffy's, and Ace's inherited will and freedom is to live freely. So I think some of them are going to clash obviously with each other, as in we clearly see that Emus is obviously going to clash with everyone else's, because one's trying to live freely and one's trying to rule. But like the way we saw Rocks in trying to rule, I didn't see him in a way trying to dominate others the way Emu is. He's just trying to rule whatever, right? So I feel like because of that, people tend to clash through their indifference inherited will that they have within themselves, right? I also believe that Garp and Dragon actually have the same inherited will and freedom. And that is more structured and organized as a way to protect or protecting their freedom or others people's freedom. Whereas, and the reason I say that is because, like, for example, there's more as an order, as in, remember the whole, you especially brought it up, in Empo Down, when Hannibal was telling Luffy why you can't do this. Because you're going to affect all the other people's freedoms, because now you're letting these vicious, violent criminals attack the world. We can't let them free. Luffy's like, I don't care about any of that. Luffy's like, I'm going to live free. I'm going to do whatever I want. Where I believe where Garp is going to that statement why he wouldn't join Roger, he mentioned who's going to protect the ones who can't protect themselves. And then if you kind of see like our Dragon literally shares that, but goes in about a different way than Garp does it. Because Dragon actually hates violence, but he believes that people need to be protected, but they also need to learn to fight for themselves. So I believe that they kind of share, Garp and Dragon kind of share something similar, but the way they're going about it is differently. We're going to see that some people clash with each other in that aspect because we saw, not that they were full-on enemies like that way, but they clashed heavily, as in a Roger and Rox, and kind of even a Garp and Roger, because their structure is different. Garp and them confused as a danger why they clash, because he's a Marine and he's a pirate. And how pirate and freedom literally coexist with each other, or like they're like the embodiment of freedom. So going to what I'm saying is that I believe that Emu and Joy Boy could have been cool friends, whatever, at first, but eventually their inherited wills of freedom grew to clash with each other to battle. Whereas in, like Sebastian kind of saying, isn't that right? He believed the best way for people to live, right, is for me controlling them and dominating them. I control this, their freedom in that aspect. Where we look at Joy Boy, we hear from Vegapunk saying that he was creating these ancient weapons for people to live freely with. But if someone's using it as a danger, no. The cause of people freely using these things is going to cause such and such. That needs to be controlled. Where Joy Boy is like, nah, everyone should have this power. Everyone should have this stuff. One can view it as a danger. So I believe these are just examples of that mindset where their freedoms or their inherited wills clash with each other and why they became enemies to the point where they did.
You know what's crazy? I think this might have been... I think you've said many good things on this pod throughout the years, but I think you took notes on this too, right?
Yeah.
All right. I think because you took notes on it, I think you nailed probably one of your best takes I've ever heard, ever. Like, seriously.
Thank you.
I think that the way you involved all these intricacies and also put it all back together was phenomenal. I think this is something I'm definitely going to chop up because it speaks about like how freedom of choice is also a freedom of oppression to some others. So this was great, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really messed with that take.
When my name come up,
Yo, Mar's so funny,
Yeah.
I had a little bit similar thoughts to Lawrence, but not fully. But my mind went something way different, and it actually goes to more towards the Bible a little bit. I was focused on what Emo was saying, right? When he says, when power so lusted after is so easily gained, and he says corruption. And I realized who did he focus on? He focused on Dory and Bargy, and you could think of the whole giants. They're the symbol of power, and their fight for 100 years is to prove who was stronger, but also like their warrior spirit, and so it's like you could say like that goes in towards power gaining way. Like they're already powerhouses and they wanted more power, and that kind of mindset. I didn't go in more too deep into that. Then he says the same thing. I mean, not same thing, but he says something similar to like choosing servitude out of self-interest. He says covenants, but who you think of is Harold. And Lily, that's Harold's whole story. Like Lily, a person who was just like Dory and Bragi, was a self-centered warrior person, but end up changing, meaning a woman, changed his whole idea that now he could live for himself, but he chooses to serve others, to sell his soul to save Outbath, to be a peaceful nation. That was Harold's life story. Now, this is the part I found interesting. When he says the envy part, seeks to achieve one's goals. There's no other picture there, but who do you see? You see him, Emu himself. He said the power of omen. I mean, maybe I'm thinking too much deep into it, but I thought of that was probably Emo's. Like, serving others was Harold's. Power was the giants. But envy was Emo's.
Emu to Joy Boy.
Yeah. But not just to Joy Boy. I thought of, what did other people say? I remember what Rock said to Emu. Davy Jones was the first king. And Emu got upset. He wasn't, whatever. And we know, when we see a little bit of the flashback of, we don't know who it is. We just know it's most likely Joy Boy or Nika or whoever, and with somebody else. And he thought of that moment. I said the only people heavily distressed that who torments Emu for even 800 years to now that he's obviously focusing on. I'm not adding Ninghad because I don't know their whatever, but he doesn't really mention Ninghad. But most people he mentions, Joy Boy one or Nika. Then the other one is Davy Jones, the posse first king. And I said, I wonder there's a possibility that he envied them. Like he became friends, but eventually he envied them. Admiration, respect that turned into envy and wanting what they had. But I also thought of who also did the same thing. Saiyan, who was close, was God's son, but envied and wanted God's power and position, but knew he couldn't get it. So he maneuvered things in a way to show that he could somehow get it. And I thought even the wording itself, he says, God and, the devil. What is the difference? the devil means, it means slander. Well, God actually means, a mighty one. But even the Bible describes a god as anything could be worshipped as a god. Like, God doesn't necessarily mean a powerful spirit or powerful person or whatever. It can mean anything that you turn into. Even the Bible says your belly could be your own god. Because that's what you worship. If you so get consumed on or focus on eating food itself, like that's all you do, that's all you want to do. You're worshiping food itself to your belly, that's your God. That's what you're going to say.
In a way, like anything you put above anything and everything else, that becomes your God, is what Lionel's saying.
And I thought, like, that's interesting as well. As, like, so there's a possibility that Emu had a somewhat relationship with, Job or Davy Jones. And I thought of what other relationships we saw. And I saw of a king and another person. So I really thought of, there could be mirror images, which Oda always does, of Harold and Rox, or Odin and Whitebeard, or other people who were part of a kingdom or whatever that could have mirrored Emu's actual life somewhat. To a degree, like, obviously pick and choose in certain things or certain ways, or even Doflamingo. There could have been a mirror image of one of their stories that could have predicting Emus. And it became, like, some admiration and respect. But also, argue Blackbeard. Blackbeard admirized and respected Whitebeard. Eventually, what did he do? He ended up turning on him and ended up wanting to get his power. Again, that could have been another mimic of what Emu did. Again, we don't know the whole story, but, like, the fact that he said Emu is the characteristic and described as the devil, but he's actually showing certain things as that. But we saw, like, in my studies. So I'm going to skip a little bit, but it says, describing the devil, like, overall, but I'm going to skip a lot because I'm just going to read this part. It says, each one is tried by being drawn out and enticed by its own desire, and which Lawrence was also saying and referencing, and I think you did it too. Then the desire, when it has become fertile, gives birth to sin. In turn, sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth, it brings up death. But if going off that describes the devil's journey, that he let these thoughts, his mind go to a darker thought process, greed, envy, whatever, that led him to become the devil. And then we know our situation now. Like, Emu's really another version of that, and I think that's what Oda's kind of applying. So Emu's like God, devil. What's the difference? Because again, anything that you've been worshipped could be a god. So Emu could have wanted to worship or whatever, that he became a god, like he's the god of the world. But also he's also a devil because his image, his power, his influence of what he's doing is all like the devil. So like that's what I'm saying. Oda's playing with these certain words, but they also have somewhat meaning to the Bible and also the story of One Piece or even Emu's past. I just sort of why didn't nobody was there except because in the covenants, that's what I thought the corruption covenants, though he emphasized those two, but he didn't do that. But when you saw Emu, and that's what I thought that could be linked to Emu's past, especially seeing later on a mini flashback of possibly involving Emu as well. Because again, I literally got shocked when I saw Emu have that reaction. It's not right, Joy Boy. And that made me think, all right, for you to have that reaction, that means there's way more to the story of you guys just being enemies. It could be enemies, but that's what I was thinking of or like Emu could have felt betrayed at some point, or Emu betrayed them at one point. Like, the betrayal had to be involved because, like, again, just like the devil betrayed God, and betrayal is such a heavy thing. Like, betrayal to anyone, to anything, like, it hurts deep, it cuts deep, it could last years of pain. And to me, I feel like Emu's anger could have been towards an enemy, but it also could have been something deeper that makes him react that way. Because Emu is not reacting that way to anybody. We see that when he feels Joy Boy, he's like he fell to his knees, Joy. Like, every time you bring up Davy Jones or Joy Boy's name, or you make some reference to them, their power or whatever, he loses it every time. We see it even in the throne room. When you bring up Lilith and you bring up D, immediately he turned into the monster. And that's what I was thinking. There has to be more, than just enemies. Something good. I don't know if Emu felt betrayal. We know the betrayal was portrayed with Lilith in the mistaken betrayal, and he felt towards that way. But it could have been something more with Joe Boy and them. It could have been he felt he was betrayed, then he actually ended up doing the betraying itself. So I don't know, but that's where my mind went when I saw these things and thinking about what Emu was saying.
Real quick, I'm surprised you didn't add to your part. I don't have anything long on it. But it's just funny how, because Emu says what's the difference between God and the devil? I'm surprised you didn't say, because you're alluding to the entire timeline where, like, Satan the devil, in a way, he's like showing that Emu is that or whatever, that Satan the devil is called the god of the system of things, or the god of earth, right?
I probably forgot.
He's literally called that in the Bible. And in a way, he's the devil, but he's also called the God in the Bible. And Emu's saying, what's the difference between the God and the devil? So I thought Lara was going to make that connection or comparison. So I just made it for you.
And one more thing, and I think it's funny that how Oda's making Emu speak That's through the King James Version of the Bible. If you read the King James Version, like art thou, whatever, that's how they speak in the King James Version. So like, he's really making them speak in an old biblical reference way. I just forgot to mention that too as well.
Yeah, so the way Emu be breaking down these like corruptions and covenants and the power of omen feels very deliberate. It almost reads like a philosophical system, almost. And to me, it echoes the idea of the 7 deadly sins. Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. If Emu is pulling from that framework, then some of these connections feel pretty clear. While Dorian Broggie, you could argue lust, not necessarily in a literal sense, but in terms of desire and indulgence and battle and glory. I know it's Emu speaking probably about himself, but I sort of interpreted what Emu was saying was Oda trying to say this about Loki too. With Loki, envy makes the most sense. His anger, his resentment, and his drive all stem from what was technically stolen from him throughout his life. Harold is where it gets interesting. At first, you could argue either greed for his sin or pride. But the more I think about it, pride fits much better if his servitude was something he accepted to elevate himself to gain status, like Lionel said, legacy or control over Elbaf's future, then that's not humility. That's self-exaltation. How do you say that word?
Exaltation is correct.
Right. And in a culture like Elbaf, where pride is everything, that becomes even more dangerous. Harold may have sacrificed for the future, but in doing so, he was still operating within that prideful framework. And that's exactly what Emu exploited. So I would say those are the 3 sins. What I really like here is what Oda is doing thematically. When you combine pride, lust, and envy, you get a mindset where the self is everything. Others are either tools or obstacles, and desire overrides morality. That's the foundation of ego-driven evil. Pride becomes the root, and envy and lust grow from it. Now, that ties directly to the celestial dragons. They see themselves as superior. Yet they're constantly being driven by like dissatisfaction, or they're resentful of anything they don't have, and they're obsessed with control and indulgence. Everything becomes about serving the self. That's why Emu calls it domination. But Loki pushes back on that, and I love this moment. Instead of calling it domination, he calls it what it really sounds like. A contract with the devil. And that hits because Loki, despite being selfish as hell, at times throughout this damn story, he has still shown he could put others first. Then Emu responds with one of the coldest lines in the chapter. God, devil? What's the difference, Loki? That line says a lot. To Emu, it doesn't matter how you frame it, whether it's divine authority or demonic temptation. Both paths lead to some type of control. Both are just justified interpretations of power. In his mind, domination is the end goal, and the method of getting there doesn't matter. So this is where I'm going to have to lean on the twins a little bit, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I wondered why Oda made these 3 sins. I said, what? Why did Oda choose these 3 sins? Why did he choose pride, lust, and envy? So here I go, right? And this is why it leads perfectly into Joy Boy's connection. We see these 2 silhouettes, very likely Joy Boy and Emu, laughing together because there's laughing signs. If that really is Emu, he doesn't have the crown yet as well, so you can see this is before a time everything changed for him. So what were they laughing about? And this is where like me and Lawrence kind of agree. It's basically if Luffy represents Joy Boy's will, and Luffy's dream is to be the freest person in the world, then Joy Boy likely had that same ideology. But what if Emu misunderstood that idea in that moment? To me, what Emu is saying is probably what Joy Boy said in the past and said it to Emu. And Joy Boy is the one that says, "Isn't that right?" and starts laughing. And him and Emu start laughing. And that's where the difference of freedoms come into play. So domination is the only true bliss, right? That's what he says. That moment they shared everything. Laughing together could have been the same idea, just interpreted in completely different ways. And that would explain why Emu reacts so emotionally when he says Joy Boy's name. That's not just anger. That's history. That's someone who knew him, stood beside him, and ultimately diverged from him in a fundamental way. So this is where it gets kind of deep. Since the chapter is titled God and Devil, it made me think of a relevant biblical parallel, specifically Gospel of Matthew 4:1-11, where Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness. First, Satan challenges Jesus to turn stones into bread, appealing to physical need and desire. Jesus rejects this, saying, man does not live on bread alone, but on the word of God, showing restraint against easy material. The devil shows his envy with Jesus the same way Emu is tempting Loki's envy or himself in the past. Then Satan takes Jesus to the pinnacle of the holy city, to the temple, and tells Jesus to throw himself down, trying to provoke pride and force divine intervention. Again, Jesus refuses, saying you should not test God. This shows the devil tempting Jesus' pride the way Emu did with Harold in the covenant. Finally, Satan shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and offers them to him in exchange for worship, absolute power, and domination, handed to him instantly. Jesus rejects this as well, choosing faith over control. This shows the devil tempting Jesus with lust, the same way Emu tempted Dorian Bragi with the diabolical covenant Domi Reversi. What's important in this pattern is temptation through lust, pride, and envy. And that lines up closely with what Emu is describing. Power that corrupts when gained too easily, envy that drives ambition, and servitude chosen out of self-interest, which ultimately ties back to pride. In that sense, this moment reflects exactly what Emu was saying about human nature, but from the opposite perspective, where Jesus rejects those temptations with Satan, maybe so did Joy Boy with Emu. And Emu and the devil represents someone who embraces them. That's what this makes me feel like masterclass writing. It's just not a fight, it's a clash of philosophies. So I wanted to see what John thought about that because I had to do some work for that one.
Nah, that was actually really good.
Yeah.
Like tying it to because like you said, what Satan tried tempting Jesus with, there are different aspects there. And you're not wrong with those aspects about what he's attacking and how obviously Jesus rejected them all. But what Satan was trying to target, so you got to get Jesus to do anything to Satan's will, so to speak, or what he wanted. You don't want to involve yourself in anything what Satan is doing, you know?
I was like, yo, why would he choose these three sins? And then I was looking through the Bible and I was like trying to figure it out, like where could have possibly have been where these three sins have been in one place. And then it brought me straight to Matthew 4, 1 through 11. And I was like, no, this is not coincidence. Like, like the three times he tempted Jesus was considering those sins. And one, we also see Emu with three skulls. We also see like pairs of three throughout this show all the time. And then his connection, obviously, and then the title, obviously. And I'm like, nah, this is crazy now.
No, that was good because like I actually thought of too, like when I was talking about the wills thing, I thought of the three thing, and I thought of asking, are there three different types of wills in the One Piece world? But I think there's only three. That's why I said I went with Emus, Davies, and Joy Boys, like different ones. But I thought of no, because then there's like Dragon and Garps in a way, and I think it's kind of different from all of theirs, you know. But no, yeah, there's definitely something with the three that Oda is using, you know.
Yeah.